Hey there, and welcome to U Talk. We connect with amazing people from across Canada and ask them about their stories, passions, and experiences. I'm your host, Ryan Funk. Called The White Night, Nuit Blanche is a free nighttime exploration and celebration of contemporary art that kickstarts Culture Days Manitoba. I thought I had missed it this year, but luckily the events are continuing to be held until this Sunday, October 24th. Luv Lite is located at 492 Main Street. It was created by artist Joshua Banman. I got to connect with Josh about his project and life as an artist and experimental storyteller.
I'm an artist in Winnipeg. I would describe myself as a storyteller. My background, though, is in theater in particular. So I graduated at University of Manitoba back in 2011 from the Black Hole Theater with a major in theater. But I've been exploring as I returned to the arts about a year ago, a bunch of different mediums, in part because COVID's really changed the way we can consume story and art, and in part because I really want to affect my audience.
I know looking on your website, you called yourself an experimental storyteller. What does that exactly mean?
Good question. I think I'm discovering that myself. I think of it like this. We often think about story. If I tell someone I'm a storyteller, I think what comes to mind are some really traditional mediums. Maybe that's writing a novel or a short story. Or maybe it's a play or even a screenplay or something like that. And they have a beginning and a middle and an end, right? And they're told in a linear fashion. And so to me, to be an experimental storyteller is to think about using the scientific method to say, I have a hypothesis. Maybe it's about reality, or maybe it's about my audience, or maybe it's about an idea that I'm telling the story about. And then how can I, in the way that we're telling that story, explore and test and potentially disprove that hypothesis and learn something about the nature of reality. So that may look like, my Nuit Blanche exhibit has a bunch of story elements to it, even though it's, in a traditional sense, you'd describe it as a visual arts installation. You wouldn't describe it as theater. You wouldn't describe it as storytelling. But to me, actually, it's dripping in story. And so when I call myself an experimental storyteller, it's really to say I don't want to be bound to any medium, but I do want my audience to be thinking about the fact that as soon as language is introduced to a human, we start to have an internal monologue and we start to tell ourselves a story, right? There's a line in a song I love that says, everyone's a hero in their made up movie life. But that's true, right? And so even, as you go through your day, you're thinking about Ryan and Josh is thinking about Josh. Narcissistically, I'm the hero in this story, right? And so I'm wanting to experiment with different modes and mediums to explore the nature of storytelling and to challenge my audience to think about what it means to be a storyteller themselves too.
I can really appreciate that different approach to stories. I was talking to a musician earlier today, and she's been focusing on like different genres and things for her first project. And you really want to, like you said, pull yourself in different directions. Be flexible. It allows you to think outside the box and create an element that someone may not thought of before.
Yeah, sure.
You're an actor, an artist. What first attracted you to get into, the arts in all these different avenues?
When I graduated from theater, with a theater degree in 2011, I knew I wanted to act, in part because in the play, that pretending to be someone else lets you build empathy and compassion and understand other people, and it's at its best a really fun and playful way to explore and being a specific role as an actor in fleshing out a story. I didn't have the courage to stay with the arts though back in 2011. In part, my wife and I were drowning in student debt, and I had really great opportunities with, at the time I was working for Apple. So I returned actually to the arts a year ago and committed to being a full-time artist. And what draws me to it, to answer your question, Ryan, I think at its best, the work of a cultural worker, an artist, is really noble stuff. And what the work of an artist is supposed to do is the work that, at its best, religion's done for us, past art's done for us, stories done for us, and myth. And it's to highlight for humankind and the individual what it means to be a human, and how to be a human. It's educational in that sense. But I'll give this asterisk to that. If art is exclusively looking to be educational, it's the cardinal sin to art, because then it's preachy, and it's Sesame Street at that point. And I mean, Sesame Street at its best actually is not the cardinal sin I'm talking about, because it worries about being high quality, being entertaining, being compelling. And so to me, the drive is, yes, absolutely, I have ideas and thoughts that I want my audience to ruminate with and consider what it means to be a human in the 21st century. But what I owe to them is really compelling experiences or stories or art, that allows them to easily give me their attention.
It can get preachy if it's just like educational purposes. I think a good example would be Christian content. Sure. A great book based in kind of that lore and mythology of like ancient Egypt and the Israelites, like Prince of Egypt. That's such a good movie, like art first.
Phenomenal animation, right? It's got a great soundtrack. Yeah, and it concerns itself, right? That's a really good example, right? It concerns itself with really being a compelling and authentic, a truthful story. And so it allows, for it to share this story of the Exodus and the diaspora of the Jewish people out of Egypt, right?
It allows like secular audiences that don't necessarily believe in that to appreciate and enjoy it well. I think VeggieTales is another example of a show that was Christian, but everyone could enjoy it because it was entertainment art first.
Yeah, I'm thinking of some silly songs with Larry now.
You came into art like about a year ago. What sort of mediums and things are you tackling? What are you doing in your art?
Lots. I like to sit down. I'll be honest. So experimenting with things that computers can do for me helps a lot. I part of my plight is I have a condition called ulcerative colitis. I get ulcers in my colon. It's really painful. My body doesn't always want to respond to the hands-on stuff that I'd like to do. So even this Nuit Blanche exhibit I just did with Luv Lite, it's making use of augmented reality. I'm going to show off something to you here because the back end of it is built in Snapchat.
Okay.
Popular augmented reality, social media messaging app. I'm running Snapchat on my computer right now. And you can see I can bring in the special effects that are used in Luv Lite here into a webcam meeting. So, I can conjure flame in my hands. By opening my mouth, you can see that halos appearing and disappearing. When I raise my eyebrows, I'm getting lasers out of my eyes. And this is my favorite thing here, Ryan. The lasers follow my gaze, not my head. So you'll see.
Whoa, that's so sick. That's so cool.
And so to me, in one sense, it's brain candy, right? Like it's just play. But where I think it gets really exciting is can I invite my audience to think about how they see themselves and what an augmented reality is and what the relationship with technology is. So if you were to go see Luv Lite, there's a poster there. And it, it gives my name, my website, and the sponsors for Culture Days and Nuit Blanche. But in the middle, it reads like a TV guide, which is an older form, right? We don't look at TV guides much nowadays. So it says, Luv Lite, Songs of Love is kind of my handle that I go by. and it reads as reality slash drama or comedy. And then it gives a synopsis, a little log line for the thing. And it says, a talented angel wrestles with amnesia after falling from heaven into the heart of a Canadian city. So what I want my audience to think as they go up to these TVs and they're playing with these augmented reality special effects I just showed you, is I want them to realize, oh, they're the angel that's playing with these TVs. And of course they have amnesia. They didn't remember that they were an angel, for heaven's sake, when they first showed up to this, right? But it's supposed to reward curiosity and in that sense be educational for the user, the audience who's experiencing that, for them to think a little bit about the story that they're telling themselves, to think a little bit about what their relationship with screens in particular and technology. So I spend a lot of time with televisions as well too. There's a nostalgia with those old tube TVs. And they also use some really unique technology. The way we broadcast to those CRTs, Ryan, was with radio frequency. So whether that was over the air on the rabbit ears or whether that was over a coax cable to the TV, it's using radio frequency. And radio frequency is light, just invisible to the human eye. It's at a lower frequency than what is visible light, and just the instruments on our body can't see it. So I've been experimenting with that. I don't have anything to announce yet, but the reason I own a whole bunch of old tube TVs is because part of my artistic research and experimentation has been figuring out how to broadcast to many channels at once so that an audience member, when we get out of COVID times, could actually go interact with the TV and would experience a narrative that's happening in a nonlinear fashion across many TV channels and channel surf across that content.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Thank you. I'm glad you think so. That's a big passion project for me. It's called the Patavision. But other than that, I'm a writer. I act. I audition more than I act. I'll confess. And so I filmed a short film this summer that aired at the Windex Film Festival in Winnipeg for the One Take Super 8. So I shot that with my nieces and nephews. I call them my nibblings. If I have my brothers and sisters are my siblings, my nieces and nephews are my nibblings. It was about a boy who isolates himself from his family to live on their acreage so that he can commit himself to trying to end the drought that's happening in the Pembina Valley. And so if you don't know, Lake Minnewaska has been drying up there.
Yeah, it was a bad year this year.
Yeah, so we even shot some of the film right on the lake bed. And I went to high school in Morden, so I'd never seen the lake that low. And then I have about to air. I'm just in the editing process of it right now. A web series. It's 3 episodes. I was commissioned to do this with Theatre Projects Manitoba, and it's called The Recipes That Made Us. Mm-hmm. So 4 different guests in the Interlake across a bunch of towns, so Arborg and Riverton and elsewhere, are cooking with me some of their special inherited recipes from their grandparents, parents, great-grandparents. And it kind of came from in November of last year. I'm an emerging artist, right? I'm looking for work and trying to find it. I was fortunate enough to be commissioned with Theatre Projects to make an artistic project as a part of the season that they've been doing called Chautauqua, the Interlake Trail. So the mandate for Chautauqua is that it's artists collaborating with residents in the Interlake. Mm-hmm. And Ryan, I had no hot clue what I was going to make. Was I going to write a play? Yeah. Should I do this? And right at the exact same time, I lost my last grandparent. My grandfather passed away. And my brilliant wife reminded me that a lot of my memories and relationship with all 4 of my grandparents was cooking. And when we would cook together, there would be memories that would come out that it's not like they reserved them to only share when we were cooking, but it seemed that the ritual of making the recipe, whether that was making noodles or rollkuchen or liver sausage, there was memories that were attached to all the senses that come into play when you're cooking, right? Your
Yep.
smell, your feel. And so my wife said, like, why don't you go cook with people in the Interlake? And so the Recipes That Made Us was born out of that.
That's
So
awesome.
that should be airing in November and being shared on Theatre Projects Manitoba's website, on YouTube. I'm just in the thick of editing it right now with my brilliant cameraman, Patrick Jordan, here in Winnipeg.
I think that's the coolest part of being involved in the arts in a creative field, that even if you have like a particular idea or goal, sometimes like, oh, I'm a painter or photographer, sometimes you get led down a different path to something that you never even anticipated.
You're totally right. And so it's why you'll hear me. I anticipate I'll be insistent on this for my entire career as an artist, is that I'm a storyteller. And whatever the medium will be, I'm fortunate enough to have access to technology and an aptitude for it. So I can build things like an augmented reality mask, or I can study radio frequency. But who knows? You may see me performing in a one-man play at Winnipeg Fringe Festival next summer, because that's where the story took me.
Why did you want to participate in Nuit Blanche this year?
Nuit Blanche is one of the coolest art festivals. Have you gotten to participate in any of the nights just as an audience member?
I did before. I haven't. I'm planning on going to check out a few exhibits over this week.
Well, there's something really electric when, a whole crowd at night is traversing across, downtown Winnipeg in the Exchange District. And what ends up happening, because, the theme's always been illuminate the night. So it's light-based art installations, is you can see these little touchstones as you're walking across downtown Winnipeg. I live in the West End, and so walking in this neighborhood is something I'm doing all the time. It's how I get to work. It's how I get to my friends' places. And so to do that at night, combined with the intersocial experience of hundreds of people being out and about, and then these new milestones, touchstones of light. My favorite one, it's years back, it was called the incandescent cloud. So it was this big tree, and this tree, instead of leaves and branches, consisted of hundreds of light bulbs. And all of the light bulbs, Ryan, had drawstrings on them. And you were invited as a participant to go and pull on the drawstrings, and you could turn on or off any of the light bulbs. And because of the scale of this thing, probably about a dozen people could fit under the canopy of the cloud tree concoction. And it became this really magical thing. You may have this counter will that has you wanting to turn off all the lights. You may be the opposite, who's wanting to turn it on. And as you're under the tree, you're catching the eye of other folks, right? And you're having a shared experience that isn't language based. It's even, in an abstract sense, hardly story based. But it evokes curiosity and invites participation and interactivity. So at its best, Nuit Blanche exhibits are really something quite magical. And so I've always dreamt of having an exhibit there. I've pitched before, but never been successful. And so it's serendipity that I had all these tube TVs this summer for another project, and that I'm an enthusiastic amateur in like everything I do, Ryan. It's the shame of being a jack of all trades. But I had been dabbling in making Snapchat lenses. And so I knew I had what it takes to make this. It came together and synthesized, and I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out.
I think that's the coolest thing about art, that it can transcend language, story, barriers. Like just being able to turn on the lights, everyone's coming together to make a project. Or with your augmented reality setup, people don't necessarily have to speak English or understand. They just go up and they're, whoa, what's this? And I think that's just how powerful art can be.
To be accessible across different abilities, different languages, different cultures, ethnicities, I really think helps us understand that we're living in a global tribe now in the 21st century. And we're more alike than we're different as we look around the world, and not all of our systems or societies are as inclusive or as just as they could be. And so, um, I think that relies on the individual to have a certain responsibility to that as a constituent in a democracy, as an individual just living their life. And so, small things like that, like an incandescent cloud,
Yeah.
I think has really immense cultural impacts, even though it may be not evident, at first glance.
Yeah. And I mean, art is just keystone to the human experience. We've been doing art for tens of thousands of years. Find the cave drawings like on the walls, and some of them are really good. You're like, whoa, I didn't realize people like tens of thousands of years ago had really good like drawing skills.
Sure, sure, and impressive in the scale, and even if you look at where some of those drawings are on the walls of some of those caves, you have to ask yourself, how did a person get up here? Um, Even with the technology we'd have today with ladders and hydraulics and stuff like that, it's still an impressive feat even today. Never mind what it would have cost in terms of tools and human power and work to accomplish some of that.
What sort of like you have a number of projects kind of in the works right now, one coming out in November. What are you hoping to like tackle or get to in the future? What's your dream project?
Okay, I'll tell you two dream projects here. Okay, so one, Ryan, and I share this vulnerably. I fear it's I'm going to miss my chance for it with Daniel Craig having retired, but it is my dream since I was a little boy to be the actor who plays James Bond. And there's lots that's problematic about James Bond. But there is at his best a certain righteousness in this hero who's saving the world, and I would love as an actor to get to play that. That's the superhero I'd love to. But as a more personally as a creator, a writer, a storyteller, the Patavision's a really important project to me. And so in the decade that I stepped away from the arts, I worked with a couple Fortune 500 companies. A lot of my time was focused on change management. How do you affect change in an organization with hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees, and training? How do you look at educating an adult to adapt to stuff? And I'd love to apply some of that kind of thinking in my art to challenge my audience on what are the behaviors that we need to have as individuals to have the society that we desire, that is equitable, that's just, that fosters innovation and individual freedom as well too. And so the Patavision is you'll see this. It may be years still before it's fully funded, but it's making use of those tube TVs to tell the story of a time traveling scientist, and the scientist uncovers that he's inadvertently created a time machine. He's trying to tune into news stations around the world with his TVs. So he starts amplifying the antennas and stuff like this, and he accidentally tunes into the ability to see the future. And so it's a passive time machine. And so he starts time surfing to see the future and past, and you're left there. And if you're at this art installation of the Patavision, Ryan, each individual would have the treat of getting to play with a tube TV of their own. And you'd see this news story of this time traveling scientist, and you think, oh, neat. And as you channel surf on the TVs, on some of them, they've got the dial, which is really visceral and a treat to turn the knob and channel surf. And others, you'd use buttons. You start to realize that you're playing with his time machine, and you're seeing moments from the past and the future. And about 5 minutes into the thing, I have about a dozen scripts written for this right now. The scientist appears in the content you're consuming, and he walks right up to the camera and he looks at you and he says, "Stop playing with my time machine. I've seen the future, and it's bad, and it was so bad. I made it my life's work to create a space time machine so I could go change the future. But here's what I found out: the future's written in stone. just like the past. There's nothing we can do to change it. So I implore you, the future is so devastatingly bad that you'd fall into despair and you'd kill yourself if you saw it. So walk away. Don't even observe it. And of course, your suspension of disbelief ends as a viewer, and you go, I'm just at an art installation. You keep channel surfing, but the scientist continues to show up in the content, pleading and threatening and bargaining with you to not see the bad future. So I'm still figuring out what the bad future is. But, at the core of it, it's trying to remind an audience that we're on our screens all the time. We are consuming stories all the time. And we have a responsibility to be critical of what we're consuming, to be self-disciplined in how we're consuming it. And then two, Gandhi has this great quote. He says, be the change you wish to see in the world. We have an individual responsibility to show and extend grace to others. Something that I think, the root language of all this stuff is binary, right? And it's my experience that our stories are becoming more and more binary. They're you're right or wrong. And by extension, there's a lot of divisiveness happening in the world today. So where can we start to see part of the human condition is, for lack of a better word, a fallen nature, and that we're going to need to both extend grace to each other as human beings, but also take a personal responsibility to be the change we wish to see in the world. So the Patavision is my dream project. It's one that sometimes comes to the foreground depending on what life allows me to do, and is on the side back burner that I keep chipping away at to hopefully mount, in the next coming years. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you I'd have it mounted by now. And so, one of my lessons as an emerging artist has been the timelines of these things are maybe different than what I naively hoped.
The idea for the Patavision, that is so cool. I'm geeking out inside.
Cool.
That sounds like so much fun, and I can't wait to see something like that come to reality. And, art is just so cool. Seeing what people can come up with and do. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. So where can people find your exhibit for Nuit Blanche this year? And where can people find out more about yourself?
People can find out more about my exhibit for Nuit Blanche. It's titled Luv Lite. It's hosted, and they've been great hosts, at the Exchange District Business Development Offices. It's at 492 Main Street. If you know the Cube stage at the Exchange District, it's just the opposite side of that building. Smoke's Poutineery is facing the Cube, and on the other side on Main Street is the Exchange District Biz. And so in their two big glass displays is filled those TVs. If anyone's listened to this, I gave them some hints on how to conjure some of the special effects that happen there. There's some breadcrumbs there as well too, to help someone figure it out. But there's also not an explicit user manual. And so go play with it, be curious. And then the best place to follow what I'm doing, it's either my website, although, I update that post projects. So that's www.joshuabanman.com. But they could follow me at Songs of Love, and that's LUV, on Instagram, which is where I post my work in progress stuff. I share, I'll call it, an enthusiastic amateur in traditional animation and songwriting. At its best, there's some catchy jingles I think I've written, but I recognize it's a hobby. But you'd see some of my animations and music there, as well as it's where you could keep up to date on whatever projects I'm sharing.
Check out Nuit Blanche, winnipeg.ca, NUITBLANCHE Winnipeg, to find all the exhibits available in the Exchange, and the event goes until October 24th. If you have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight, leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.